I always say fear comes from a lack of knowledge. The Grand Canyon, for sure, it really just pushed me to believe that I could do anything and that I probably had the ability and the skills more than I thought I did. Our entire 22-foot-long boat and both of us are inside a wave. That's how big the water is down there.
Good. All right. So whenever you're ready.
Oh, I'm ready. Go. I'm good. I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm always ready.
So welcome, Jillian, on the podcast. Amazing to have you live from British Columbia.
Yeah, Camp My Way. Thank you for having me. Bonjour.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a first. It's the night or the morning for you for the first time we have an English episode. I mean, an episode fully in English. And I think first time also, I'm doing it with the video. So it's the night of the experiments today.
Awesome.
But really, really happy to have you on the podcast today. We're gonna talk, I guess, about outdoorsy stuff, because that's what you are clearly into. And well, maybe as an introduction, you can tell us what you're doing now and where you're coming from.
Sure. So I'm Jillian Brown. I'm a Canadian photographer, adventurer, writer, now CEO and lead guide for an organization or a nonprofit, I guess I should say, called Camp My Way, which is a wilderness well-being program for first responders, veterans, and youth affected by PTSD. So that's where I'm at now. That's the very brief, quick intro to me.
And so what's your relationship with the PTSD? And maybe can you also walk us through very briefly what's PTSD? Sorry.
Sure. So PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. It goes by a number of different terms nowadays. OSI, so operational stress injury, is what it's referred to in the first responder world now. PTSI, PTS, all sorts of things. Essentially, all it is a buildup of energy within our nervous system that's trapped and isn't getting moved. And anything can kind of cause it. Everyone says it's trauma, but to every person, trauma is something different. Like I said, it's essentially just whatever energizes us. Our nervous system doesn't know the difference between being shot at or having surgery. Our nervous system just reacts and knows, okay, danger, fear, and energy is released. And we're now, in this day and age, not moving that energy like we used to, or like animals do, where they start shaking and shake it off. Back in the day, they called it shell shock. And sometimes they'd even shoot you back when soldiers would start shaking in their boots or trembling, because it was just such a stigma, and still is. So we just trap all that energy and don't know how to move it, or aren't given the tools anymore with it, which is what happened when I was told of my diagnosis of PTSD after leaving an abusive relationship and ending up homeless in a tent and contemplating suicide. I went to a counselor, and I was just told, it sounds like you have PTSD. And I wasn't even given what PTSD stood for, let alone tools, ways to manage it, anything to get through it. It was come back next week, let's talk some more. And I was sent back to my tent in the woods by myself,
Wow.
more confused and scared than I was when I first went to the counselor, which unfortunately is kind of how it goes with most and for most people, especially our first responders. So here at camp, we give that education that I just kind of shared, as well as share the tools that I learned and that the founder and my partner Terrence Kosakar learned through our own experiences of trying to and putting it sorry trying to is the wrong word, putting in the work to save our own lives through being outdoors, fitness, and moving that energy. Basically, we just share all of what we learn, our daily routines, with those who come up to camp.
Wow. Well, I was familiar with PTSD, but only applied within, I mean, for veterans, so people who actually went to war and were getting shot at. Basically, that's the context in which most of the time I heard PTSD.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting to hear, because at least in Europe, I don't know in Canada or North America, but I have the feeling it's still not something we were really open to talk about. It's, yeah, even within the veterans community, it's like I watched an interview of a sniper from the British Army recently, and he was saying basically, even he was saying he was ashamed still today to say he was affected by PTSD. So
Yeah,
I think it's pretty amazing. Yeah. So you go ahead.
No, that's the big thing, is that there's still such a stigma around it. And I hate using that word. And a lot of people are like, it's not stigmatized. There's so many things out there, especially during COVID. There's so many things online that you can read about. But just reading about something or going to a counselor and talking about what you've been through doesn't move that energy that's trapped in you. And you go and read on these platforms and things, they're not giving tools. They're making you go back onto social media and read some more and be on a device or a platform that is the number one cause of mental illness or PTSD or self-doubt. It's the worst place for self-care you could possibly go. Yeah, it's sad that it's such a kind of frowned upon thing, and it's not so much needing to talk about these things, it's just that we need education around these things. And that needs to start when we're kids. We need to be given these tools on how to manage not just emotions, but experiences and and how to end our energy, essentially. Yeah. And if we start doing that, like Buddha says, or the Dalai Lama, if we can teach kids to meditate 10 minutes a day, we can have world peace in one generation. And it's totally true. You can change a world by just teaching some breathing and a little bit of fitness and making it a ritual in a kid's life for the rest of their life. It'll completely change the world.
It's gonna be it would be probably more useful than most of the stuff, at least I had to learn at school.
But I definitely agree with you on that. Yeah. The things that I learned the most in school, they don't even teach anymore in school. There isn't art anymore in school. A lot of schools, there aren't gym classes. There's no outdoor education classes. That's for sure anymore. Like, those are the things that I remember that I took away from school. Not like mathematics, like crazy mathematics. I know how to add and subtract. That was great, but I learned that in grade 3. Like,
I agree fully. And on regarding Camp My Way, when did it become obvious for Terrence and yourself that you had to start Camp My Way and structure it the way it is structured today?
So Terrence Kosakar founded Camp My Way in 2016 after being a first responder and at the Olympics. I should start there. And dealing with the Georgian athlete who passed away on the luge track. He was the first responder on scene. And it wasn't that one incident that caused PTSD in him. It was the buildup of all of his life experiences of being in organized crime prior to that, being in prison, being in fights, being a first responder, a firefighter, a paramedic, all of these things, and having no knowledge or education, as we just touched upon, about this energy buildup. So when this athlete died and the world moved on immediately and he didn't understand why. And in a number of years, he ended up losing everything, his family, his home, his careers, and found himself homeless. And when he went to commit suicide, he says that he jumped, but he ended up waking up here at his camp in the backcountry of British Columbia. And it was just him. And that was it. There was no power. There was no food. He had to figure out how to survive on his own. And he had to put in the work to save his own life. And after doing that and figuring out that he needed to do fitness and he needed to live off the land and fish and hunt with the native community here, and learn to forgive and find gratitude for everything, that's when he realized he needed to open up his doors to other first responders because there was nobody who was doing that. And he knew what saved him and he could share that life with others. And my story is different but similar. I moved out to British Columbia after finishing university. Totally great upbringing, amazing family, still in my life, in 2010, and fell in love with this musher, a dog sled company, dog sledding. And we started a life together, 5.5 years, started our own dog sled company, rescued dogs from all over Canada. And unfortunately, that relationship was abusive from basically the get-go. So after 5.5 years, I ended up having to leave. I had been hiding $300 in my camera bag, and I had to leave my entire life, my businesses, my love, my dogs, everything behind, and bought a tent for $60 from a woman by the side of the road and was homeless for 7 months in this tent. And as I mentioned, that was where after I'm somewhere that I'm thinking I'm safe, thinking I should be now happy, I can move on, I was then having all of the emotions and everything implode and explode within me and out of me, and didn't have any knowledge about what was going on. Went to a counselor and, like I said, was just told the term PTSD and not given any explanation and just sent back to my tent. I wasn't even asked like where I was living. Are you okay? Like I was just sent back to my tent and grabbed my dog and let her off her leash, and just the one dog that I had with me. And I just started following her for the whole day after that. And like, where's she going? Like running around all over the forest and the mountains. And when I got back to my tent that night, I actually slept for the first time in who knows how many years. And the next day I got up and did it again. I let her off the leash and just followed her all day. And I did that for quite some time and realized that I was finally sleeping and my emotions were starting to settle, and connected that it was living in that present moment of following my dog and just thinking about where are we going next? What's she following? Oh, this is so fun. And moving that energy through fitness and fresh air, and not focused on reliving the things that I had been through and worried about where I was going in the future. It was just living in that moment. And it allowed me to start to connect back to myself and move that energy and heal. And it's not like it's not like you forget the past. It's not like the things you've been through are gone. You still have that energy. It's just moving it so that you can get through it. So you're not fixated on it. And started to incorporate more fitness within those hikes. And basically, Terrence and I were doing the exact same things. We started to push ourselves. We weren't connected yet, but we both started to push ourselves physically and mentally in different degrees, because we knew we could from overcoming what we had. We knew that we could use that energy rather than a hindrance to excel ourselves and accomplish things, using that gratitude and that forgiveness to push limits and push ourselves and believe in ourselves. For me, doing that world first and a Canadian first, these crazy expeditions. And for him, he was flipping tires all over the mountains to bring awareness to PTSD. And it was ended up being a mutual friend within this area of British Columbia. Saw we had both been doing the same thing and utilizing the same tools, and yet we hadn't connected yet. And they put us in touch, and I never left. As soon as I showed up here, I never left. It was just this perfect fit of, this is what we need to be doing, this, sharing this with the world, these tools, because they obviously work. And it's just, like I said,
Wow.
It's not a program, it's a way of life. You have to commit to saving your own life. You can't expect us to heal you.
Wow. It's a super powerful message. And your story, I knew a bit the one of Terence, because I checked some articles. I read about, the whole Olympic story, and how basically the whole organization, it looks like, asked everyone who was on the scene to just move forward and keep it quiet, not to have an impact on the whole event,
Yeah.
But your story is, it's pretty amazing. And the first question that comes to mind is, how were you able to basically because we talk about resilience on this podcast, and how determination is can basically make people move mountains. How were you able to switch from the situation you just described, being homeless, quite young, living for 7 months in a tent, to doing crazy expeditions, doing for the first time something that was never done before? And maybe you can tell us more about it. I mean, how did you operate that mindset shift, which is absolutely amazing?
I think a big part of it is the way I was raised. And I feel like a big part of why I was struggling so much was that I was so disconnected through being in that relationship and being so fixated on survival in that relationship, that I had pushed my passions aside, my self-care, and how I was raised, which was I was very hardworking in that business and in that life. You have to be. And that's really what got me through, was just, I was naturally moving a lot of energy every day, in that place with the dog sledding and tending to them.
Yep.
And every day I would go down, and I don't know where this came from, but every day I would go down and I'd rub my face in the neck fur of the dogs and give them their morning snuggles. And I would always say to them, I'm thankful it was me there and not somebody else, because somehow I knew I was going to get through, and maybe another person wouldn't. And I have no idea where that came from, but I always look back at my grandparents and my great grandparents and my parents, and just the determination they instilled in me, and that drive of a hard work ethic. And it's not always easy, but if you put in the work, you're going to be able to accomplish it, to problem solve, and get your way through it. Growing up, I was living in Manitoba, in the prairies of Canada, central Canada, for half the year, and that's where I went to school. And the other half the year, growing up, I was in northwestern Ontario on a small island with my great-grandparents, grandparents, parents. Cousins would come visit. So you're on a little island with old cabins. So you have to learn how to work with what you have and put in a lot of work to get to where you want to go. And I think kind of connecting all of that once I was in the tent, and what was working to make me feel okay is how I got through that. And a lot of other people believed in me that I had never met before. Strangers, a stranger really is how I ended up leaving that relationship, because I finally was seen by somebody. They didn't know about my partner at the time. They didn't know about the dog sled business. There was no affiliation. It was just, they acknowledged my presence and existence. And I felt like I hadn't been seen for so long. I was just this guy's girlfriend. And that really gave me a lot of confidence to leave. And when I started to look at myself that way, like I was the only one that was, I guess, judging myself in that context. It just shifted mindset. A lot of the lessons were learned through experiences with wildlife and all sorts of things. Just finding that belief. And then once I started to showcase that belief in myself on social media platforms, then new people were coming into my life and connections and new opportunities. And that's how I ended up meeting Jamie Sharp, who I did the tandem sea kayak, the world first, down the Grand Canyon with. He brought me on to go and document paddling with orcas in the Johnson Strait, off the British Columbia coast. Yeah, so we were out there for a week paddling with orcas and sea lions and all this marine wildlife. We ended up with a couple grizzly bears. It was amazing. But after on that trip, Jamie's like, yeah, so I have this idea about a tandem sea kayak, taking it down the Grand Canyon, just trying to show the diversity of a tandem sea kayak. And I'm like, that sounds crazy, but also I'd totally do that with you. And come a week out from this trip, he had already arranged a partner to go, this like girlfriend of his. A week out, they break up. He calls me. He's like, so how do you feel about this? We leave in a week. You kind of expressed some interest a little while ago. Like, okay, Jamie Sharp, I'm in. And I never had these like crazy ambitions to do world first or Canadian first or any of these things, but I wasn't going to say no to those opportunities. But having somebody else believe that I could help them accomplish their goal really allowed me to believe even more in myself, that I could do that thing too. And that's what got me on that trip for sure, and got me through it, was the fact that this amazing paddler, who had seen me paddle, so obviously knew and trusted that I could help him achieve a goal that he had, that gave me a lot of confidence on that trip, even though I was completely terrified.
Well, that's a very good point. And that the fact that you went in full, even though you were terrified. What was terrifying for you? Maybe for the people who don't know about that that trip, what was the extent of the madness?
So 100,000 people go down go through the Colorado River, through the Grand Canyon, go down the Colorado River, through the Grand Canyon every summer. So in like a 3-month span, 100,000 people go down it. So people think, oh, it's not that big a deal. But those people are in rafts, and rafts are designed to go down the Colorado River a little bit differently than a 22-foot-long fiberglass sea kayak that is self-supported, so has 12 days worth of food and gear within it, no raft along. Because it's fully self-supported, trying to roll that thing was impossible for Jamie. So that's part of it. When the Grand Canyon is rated on a totally different scale than other rivers because the water is so huge. There's so much of it. It's rated on a 1 to 10 scale, and it's based upon the likelihood that a raft will flip. So there's like class 10 rapids that you're going down, and they're just massive. And to give you an idea of it, we're in a 22-foot-long boat, 2 people, and we go through one wave. And because you're in such a long boat that doesn't have any flex to it, unlike a little playboat, a small like 6-foot-long kayak that would ride over a wave and like coast and stay on top, a long boat like that, the bow juts in to a wave and the back kind of like rides over it. It doesn't go like up like that. It's just going to go straight in and then kind of go over. So the person in the bow, me, is under the water a lot of the time. And on one wave in particular that somebody got a photo of, our entire 22-foot-long boat and both of us are inside a wave. That's how big the water is down there.
And you said you can't roll the kayak, right? If you're getting flipped?
No, we tried rolling it at the very start. where you put in, there's a nice kind of pool, flat water, and there was no way it was being rolled.
Wow.
Yeah, so we swam once the second day in a really small little rapid where we just weren't really paying much attention, and we hit a whirlpool and it flipped us over. And I didn't want to swim again after that, and that was just little. And then in one rapid we ended up over, but with the help of a lateral wave, it helped upright it. And Jamie's just such a skilled and incredible paddler too. But that was it. We didn't swim other than that second day, which was pretty incredible. We even had our rudder break in one of the biggest waves. It broke and shot us left. And we still stayed upright. It was terrifying. I got out and looked back, and Jamie was just white, like a complete ghost. I'm like, holy shit, okay, it's okay that I'm completely terrified and patting myself down, feeling like my helmet's gone and my PFD's gone. Like, do I still have skin? Like, Jesus.
Wow. So in the end, would you say that what you were terrified about was justified now that, it's behind you?
Oh yeah, I think that was smart fear. I'm not a whitewater paddler. I never have claimed to be a whitewater paddler. So for me, I always say fear comes from a lack of knowledge for the most part.
Yep.
So we fear the dark because it's unknown. We don't know what's out there, what's in the dark. We can do a whole bunch of research and know, okay, there could be a lion, there could be a bear, there could be this, that, a person, but you can't see it. So there's that fear. So for me, I didn't know a lot about the Grand Canyon. I didn't know a lot about whitewater paddling. So for me, it was a fear. And there's natural fear because there's potential for death because of the unknown factors within whitewater paddling. You don't necessarily know what's going to happen if you end up swimming in huge water like that. You could end up swallowing water. You could hit your head, right? So you have that natural fear, which keeps you really aware and, for the most part, pretty safe if it's controlled fear, right? If you let fear take over you, then you're out of control completely, and you're going to act irrationally. You're not going to think properly through it, and you're probably not going to make smart decisions. And then you're probably going to end up living that fear because of it.
Yeah.
So luckily, because I had somebody who I knew what they were doing, it was a controlled level of fear with it.
Wow.
And that's usually with all of my expeditions, whether I'm up in Alaska with 23 grizzly bears, all of these things, it's kind of a controlled fear and more of like an adrenaline than fear, because there's knowledge behind it.
Yeah. So a fear that's driving you instead of completely blocking you from, moving forward.
Yeah. You have to have it. You got to have fear to keep you safe too, to be smart, right?
Yeah.
In some context.
Yeah, I like what you said. It helps you staying aware of what's happening and staying sharp. Great. So what would you say? Because I guess, it was the first big expedition you were doing following your, this difficult period of your life you went through. What would you say were the key learnings about yourself you took away from that trip?
That one really pushed me to believe that I was able to do anything. And I kind of swore, we put in on my birthday, and I swore that I would kind of say yes to any opportunity that came about from that point on. Because if you believe that you can get through it, then I felt like you could get through it. If we had failed, if the boat had broke, we would have had to hike out. We would have figured it out, kind of thing. I always just believed that there wasn't that worry of like death. And I had done a trip before that. I traveled across Canada and lived in my Jeep for 77 days, a year after I had left that relationship. So just prior to this trip. And that really was what taught me a lot about starting to share my story, but also learning from nature and being pushed a lot further, because I so many people thought that just that was crazy for like a young woman to go and travel and live in her Jeep alone. I didn't take my dog, and I didn't have any plans on the trip at all. Anytime anybody told me to go somewhere, I didn't go there because I wanted it to be and needed it to be fully for me. And learned a ton of lessons from snowy owls and squirrels and all sorts of things. But yeah, that the Grand Canyon for sure it really just pushed me to believe that I could do anything and that I probably had the ability and the skills more than I thought I did.
Wow. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I really love the message because, it's what I take away from what you just shared is, in spite of your fears, that, I mean, you were able to go fully in, and that it's also, the whole story was made possible because of, a connection that appeared with someone else. And I think that's also the beauty of what you're describing, from Camp My Way today with Terrence to that first in the Grand Canyon. It's also the outcome of great relationships that you were able to build. So, well, yeah, I'm just amazed at how inspiring the whole story is, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
if we
there's
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go. I want to hear your next question.
No, I was about to say, if we push the fast forward button up until now, Camp My Way. So what is it I mean, you said basically that this is, you're trying to, I mean, you're not trying, you're helping people getting back in control of their life, or saving their own life, as you said, especially for first responders. But what is it exactly that you're doing? So how do they get in touch with you, and what sort of experience do you offer them, and what does it, what's the usual outcome?
For sure. We get connections all different ways. Before COVID, both Terrence and I would do presentations
Yeah.
all over. He's traveled all over the world doing them. Connections through these crazy expeditions by paddling across America to, and then social media and the Camp My Way website. All sorts of different ways people are finding out about us and Camp My Way. And camp, like I kind of mentioned, it's a week to 30-day program for now. And we're just sharing our way of life. So waking up early and going and doing breathing by the fire. We call it 5x5s, 5 breaths in, 5 breaths out, 5 times to control the mind.
Okay.
To settle the mind, to start the day. And we do a body scan. So you connect with every part of your body. You wouldn't fly a plane without having checked your plane over, right?
Yeah.
And then
Indeed.
you wouldn't fly the plane if you're not in the right mindset either. That's basically what we are. We're both the plane and the captain. So we got it before we start the day, before we go do things, before we operate. We need to make sure that both the body and the mind are right and good. And that's how we start. Then we go for a big walk around, get that fresh air, move a little bit of energy. We come back and we do some journaling. And that's to write down something that you forgive, or someone. It can be yourself, family member. But to start to move that, start to connect to forgiveness, and then gratitude, and a goal for the day, an intention for the day. And it can be something super small, like do it, clean your dishes kind of thing. Something that, you can basically achieve so that every day you feel like you're accomplishing something.
Yeah.
The big thing that I like to say is, once you can connect that forgiveness to being thankful for what you were forgiving, for that experience, for what that person did, that's when you ultimately find healing within that moment. Because everything that we go through, whether it's good or bad, creates the person that we are. And if we utilize it in a good means, then it's making us grow. So being in an abusive relationship, I never held any anger towards the person. I was with that person for a reason, because I loved them. And forgiving that situation and then being thankful for it creating the person I am now and being able to share my experiences and my tools allows me to not have any sort of anger towards that experience in any way or hold any sort of anything against that person or any of it, to be thankful for that experience. That's the biggest eventual goal of that with teaching forgiveness and gratitude. And then through the day while they're up here, while campers are here, it's being outdoors, fitness. We always do fitness. So move that energy.
Moving the tire, right?
Yeah. We have our 400-pound tire that we flipped up a couple mountains. So we make people flip that a few times and go camp for the week so that you learn to find comfort within the uncomfortable, which is huge because we can't tell people, well, the ultimate cause of your stresses is the environment to which you're in. So just change your environment. But realistically, most people can't just pack up and move out of a city and go and camp. But you can learn to find tools to feel comfortable within that uncomfortable situation. And if you can learn to find comfort when it's pouring rain and all you have to sleep under is a tarp and you're soaked and kind of shivering and you're so thankful for that warm meal, then when you go back to your home and you have a nice hot shower and you can read your book and you have your TV and Netflix, you still have that subconsciously in the back of your mind that if you lost all of it, you'd still be able to survive. If you really look deep into it, it's really hard for people to connect to that at that time. But when you're on your hands and knees, crawling through the mud, wanting somebody to save you because you feel like you're on death's doorstep, that's when you connect back to the fact that, oh, I know how to set up a tarp. Oh, okay, I can just boil some water. I can start a fire. Okay, I think I can maybe get through it. It takes being on your deathbed really to connect that. But if we can allow that to be in the back of people's minds, at least, it does help ultimately in the long run, hopefully. Like I said before, it was Terrence and I connecting that we had to save our own lives. And that's what we try to teach here. We share all the tools, but ultimately it's up to every camper to implement them. And you have to turn a routine. It takes 21 days of doing something for that routine to become ritual. And that's the ultimate goal. You have to do it every single day. The most important days to do those routines, whether it's yoga, we don't teach yoga, but if yoga is your thing that moves your energy, or journaling or whatever works for you, you have to do it on the good days and the bad days. And the good days are even more important because it makes you feel, okay, I don't need to do it today. I'm okay. Because then when on the bad day, it's even harder to get motivated to do it. So it's like we're going out on an expedition. For me, it's like taking a person out on any of my expeditions, except this is like the most timid of expedition you could possibly go on because you can stay at camp here if you want. If you're terrified to go out in a tent, then we just stay here. We don't want to make people terrified. We want them to learn comfort, like I said.
And so do you allow people to use their smartphones? Because you mentioned, most of the time it's the environment, but I also believe it's, all the disturbances, all the noise around us. So no smartphones.
There's no cell service up here. There's no, we're on Wi-Fi on this. We don't have cell service. We don't have phones. We have our satellite phone so that we can call in case of emergency. But we don't, the Wi-Fi, it's just for Terrence and I. And when campers are here, we're disconnected too. So it's great for us as well because we connect back too. It's not like we're on our devices and making them watch and feel like, oh, my addiction. Like it's like watching somebody who's coming off of cocaine. There's somebody sitting next to them snorting. Like that's just torture. We're not, there just isn't any of that in sight. And when you're out camping, you don't even think about it anyways. Like you're so out in that moment. And that's how you learn appreciation, is to be away from these things. Like people get sad, they cry. like grown men, RCMP officers, like 60-year-old RCMP officers were out here crying the other day, and they miss their family, and
Really?
they've never cried in their life, and they're crying. That's one of the most beautiful parts for us, is like people come up to support a brother that's suffering, and they end up realizing they're actually the ones that are in the worst state. They just never would admit it, because they have that mentality of, we don't talk about these things. And especially if they're in that older time set, and if their parents were within military or first responder community as well, it's even more ingrained in their mind that we don't share these things. And then when you come up to an environment where everyone's sharing and everyone feels comfortable and safe, those walls are broken down and crushed pretty quick. And those
Yeah, I
tears
guess
and
the longer,
emotions start
yeah,
flowing.
I guess,
And then they
yeah,
all find gratitude. They all immediately like, I can't wait to get back home. They're all, excuse my language, but they're all often bitching about their families or their wives, and they admit like it's not their wife that's doing anything wrong. It's that they're in a bad headspace and they just don't want to hear it. And by the time 3 days in, they're like, I can't wait. I'm so grateful for my wife. I can't wait to see her. And that's a big part of coming up here and getting away. It's just getting away from that environment and reflecting and realizing, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for that environment too.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I was about to say also with the the emotion. I guess the longer you shut them down, the bigger when they finally come out, the yeah the I mean the bigger it is, and yeah, I can
Right?
relate to the fact that when you leave comfort or things you don't even realize you should be grateful for, that's also a super powerful moment when you're like, well, actually that's what I left behind, and it's
Right?
pretty amazing what I left behind. So,
That's one of
yeah,
my favorite things about expeditions. I feel like a lot of
yeah,
adventurers and people who actually like push their outdoor limits for long periods too. I'm sure, like you just mentioned, you find that you're grateful for like the most simplistic of things, like a flushing toilet, or like just
yeah,
the access to like hot
water,
water so fast,
yeah,
like all these like the most minute details. Or
yeah,
for me, when like most expeditions, your food's often like kind of the same texture, like kind of mushy generally, like oats for breakfast, a soggy
yeah.
granola bar for lunch, and then dehydrated food for dinner. So it's all kind of the same consistency. So you really appreciate crunchy food when you're off an
That's
expedition.
right. Yeah,
Not even
yeah,
fresh, it's just crunchy.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And I mean, as you said, when I came back from Nepal, I was like, water. I can just open, go in my apartment, open, the how do you say, the tap,
Yeah,
and then have water that I can drink directly. No need to, use a peel to clean it or anything, boil it or whatever. Can just drink water,
right?
which is
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
cool.
On
And
on,
so,
on the
sorry, go
Grand
ahead.
Canyon, and then when I was on my trip paddling across America at 150 days, you're on a river the whole time, but you're on the most polluted rivers in North America. So you can't just drink the water. You can't even like, I didn't even feel comfortable filtering it and putting chemicals in it. I don't generally put chemicals in my water anyways. I always just filter with like a platypus gravity
Yeah.
works. Um, and I've always been fine just doing that. I'd rather not have chemicals in my body. But to have to haul water while you're on a river is like the most frustrating feeling. And you really connect to how bad we are tampering with our environment with that. Because you're
Yeah.
just like, I just want to drink this water. And I now have to like ration what I have to figure out when I can get more somewhere, and have to deal with all my gear while you're solo, like all those things. Yeah, for sure. Water is such a ridiculous appreciation. And
Yeah.
I understand a lot of the third world countries when it comes to that.
For sure. And I would actually be surprised, we just mentioned, both of us, the things that um, stood out for us thanks to our expeditions that we are really grateful for. What are usually the things people are the most surprised with in when they go through the Camp My Way programs? If there is any, like if most of the time it's, I don't know, one thing in particular where they are surprised or discover something that seems obvious but they never saw before.
For sure. It's not the camp, it's not the tools that we're sharing, it's that they're connecting to themselves, and they didn't expect that. Like I mentioned,
Okay.
in particular, we had a group of first responders up in October, and they were all from the same area. They had all been involved in the same incident, a really, really tragic bus rollover at a glacier in the Icefields Parkway in Alberta. And they had all been first on scene, RCMP officers, sheriffs, a firefighter. And they all came out to support the one of them who had actually spoke up and said, I'm really affected by this. I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I've been given meds, and I'm struggling. And his brothers came up to help, just to be there as support for him and to learn tools so that they could better support him once they're back at their station and working together. And those men were the ones that their surprise was, like I said, within a couple days, they're crying and they're looking at us being like, I don't know why. I've never cried in my life. I don't know why I'm crying. And they're writing, and then they read out their journal entries to us around the fire in the evening. We all read and share. And it's like, I never connected these things before. Like, I have fear of dying because I haven't spent enough time with my daughter, or like I see dead people kind of thing. Like these crazy things that they were just shocked that because they're not in an environment where it's stigmatized to talk about, where they have fear to talk about, where they are uncomfortable to talk about, that they all of a sudden are out here in this natural environment, which nature has no judgment. It's a big reason why I found so much healing being homeless in that tent, was I was not in a place where there was judgment. You're accepted. Everything in nature is accepted, whether it's perfect or imperfect. And it's allowed to flourish and grow, and nature works together to get that imperfect plant, animal, whatever it is, through it, or to utilize it in a different way. And that's the most surprising thing for every camper, is that they connect to that, a different part of themselves that they didn't even know existed before. Same with when we've had youth up here. The youth, when we go and summit one of the mountains, and the whole way up, they're like, I can't do this. Like, they're stopping all the time. I can't do this. No, there's no way I can do this. And then they get to the top and they're like, holy shit, I never thought I could do this. And it's like those little surprising moments of just like, if you believe in yourself, for one, but yeah, just connecting to self is the most surprising thing people find out here.
And, it makes me think what you said earlier, that it's probably also something we should learn, earlier as kids. How do you do that actually? Because it's a bit, not a shame, but you're like, if you can only do that at 60 years old, and you realize that all your life you've been, putting your emotions behind because, you're coming from a family with military, ties to the military or something, that makes no sense. You're like, what if you were able to use those emotions earlier in your life? What would have been your life in that case?
There's so many things, like the education system. You look at it, what are we teaching our kids in school? We're teaching them like math. Yeah, there's important things, math, like science. There's important things, but how about teaching them life skills and emotional well-being and mental well-being? But mental well-being is so attached to physical well-being, and there's not even that being taught in school anymore. Like, that's the biggest thing. If you look at Germany in their first responders in 20 years have 0 suicides. because they start when they're
Okay.
when their kids are young. They start them in the fire brigade program, so they begin to learn how to be a first responder and how to deal with the emotions, with the calls, with all of that when they're young. So by the time that comes comes a career choice, they know whether they are equipped to be a first responder or if they're not. And that's
I
why they
didn't know
have
that.
zero rate. We last year in Canada alone had 235 suicides in our first responders that were
Whoa.
documented. That's all that were documented. And that were diagnosed with PTSD. That's it. That's probably a fraction of how many actually committed suicide in Canada in our first responder community in 1 year. That's
Wow.
crazy. And that's because we're not giving tools or education when they're starting young to be able to manage this career, these careers, these stresses, but just life in general. Like, it just seems so obvious and so crazy that
Yeah.
it's not something at this time frame. Like I said, the Dalai Lama says 10 minutes a day to meditate. If we can teach our kids to meditate for 10 minutes a day, and that meditation can be like we're going to be able to get a room of grade oneers to sit still for 10 minutes, but it's not about sitting still. Do some breathing for all of 2 minutes. Breathe. Just sit together and think about your breaths for 2 minutes. And then do some jumping jacks together, move some energy, and make it every single day. Screw announcements. Screw like talking about what's coming up this week. And like, that's 30 minutes of trying to sit and listen to somebody over an intercom, blah, 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 blah. That's all I remember. How about we skip that and let's just do a few jumping jacks, a few push-ups, do a little bit of breathing. Let's go around the circle, talk about like, do we forgive our mom for packing us a tuna sandwich when we asked for peanut butter and jelly? Like, right? But like, that it's so simple, and yet it's not being done. It's just
Yeah.
crazy. Like,
And so,
especially,
yeah, best.
yeah.
I was about then to ask, how do you envision the future of Camp My Way based on what you just said? Because now you're, I mean, obviously you're, helping a part of the community of people affected by PTSD. But as we just said, I mean, the effort needed is probably, I mean, super, super, I mean, much larger, right? So, uh, is it something you are considering, like, I don't know, expanding, or starting to provide online courses? Why not for people outside of British Columbia? I don't know, but what's the next step for you?
Right? The big thing is trying to get people off of online.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this
So, yeah.
day and age, especially with COVID, we have had to be very much online and doing these kind of calls, which is so against what we want to be showcasing and stand by. But this summer we do, thanks to Surrey Firefighters Charitable Society, which is a firefighter brigade or station just south of us, outside Vancouver. They gave us a donation to start a youth program for the Surrey youth community.
Okay.
So depending on our COVID restrictions, that's going to be going on this summer so that we can start sharing more tools with youth slowly by getting them out of their environment. But I mean, ultimately, if we could change the system, that would be huge. But that's going to take more than just two people. That's going to take an entire world to start to believe in that. And Terrence and I say this all the time, but I never share it. But not enough people are suffering to do that yet.
Mm.
Change doesn't happen till people go through the suffering and realize that something needs to change. And not enough people are suffering yet. The government was just giving everybody $2,000 free a month, and nobody had to pay rent because of COVID. Like, nobody's suffering. Everyone's kind of celebrating. They got to stay at home and, and got free money from the government and didn't have to pay rent. Wow, what an amazing year. Like, yeah, I'm stuck at home, and that's kind of mentally like frustrating, but there wasn't a lot of other stresses involved. So no, there's not a ton of suffering yet. come a year from now, let's see where everybody's at. Because there's no more money coming from the government. Your kids are still stuck at home with you. You don't know how to teach them. You still don't have a job. And eventually you're going to have to start paying rent again, or you're going to be homeless. Let's see where you're at when that all happens. And maybe then the education system or the government or the parenting will change a little bit. And we'll see that maybe these kids will be the kids to not have suicide in the future.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's
it's kind of 100-year goal.
Yeah, but I think, I'm a big believer in the fact that all the big changes are actually initiated by small initiatives, or started by small initiatives that are truly impactful. And from what I could see, and the passion with which you're sharing what you're doing at Camp My Way, it's what you guys are doing. So again, for me, it's really interesting to see what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic on that topic. And yeah, pretty inspiring. I actually never heard of something similar to that in Europe. So at least definitely not in France or Switzerland. But I'll check. Maybe I don't know. I'll check. Maybe there
you
is
guys will
room
have
for
to
a Camp
hire
My
us,
Way
and we'll
Europe.
come over to France and Switzerland. Come visit us. Come on over to Canada.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, Jillian, we're slowly but surely getting close to the end. I was wondering if there is, if there would be one message or one piece of advice from your intense experiences over the past few years that you'd like to share for people who might, be affected with PTSD or not, but generally people who are considering, maybe changing their environment, as you said. What would that be?
I think the biggest and easiest thing that I can suggest to anyone, no matter where they are, whatever environment they're in, situation they're in, is go for a walk. Go for a 5-minute walk, because you're removing yourself from the negative environment that you're in. Even if it's just a walk to the end of your driveway, go for a walk to the end of your driveway, go for a 5-minute walk, and do your best to find a squirrel and have a conversation with a squirrel. Because I can guarantee you that it's going to make you smile and laugh, and you're going to look around and see if somebody's watching, and then you're going to start to chuckle because, like, man, if somebody were watching, they must think I'm completely insane right now. I'm having a conversation with a squirrel. And you're going to laugh. And it's going to make you happy. And maybe that squirrel will teach you the meaning of life like one did for me. Or maybe you'll be able to scream and yell and get some emotion out to that squirrel. Or maybe you'll feel a lot of compassion for the squirrel. But the ultimate goal is that you're getting some fresh air, you're moving some energy by going for that walk, and you're removing yourself from that that negative environment for just a few minutes. And there's no excuse, and it's acceptable no matter where you are. If you're in a workplace, if you're in a meeting and it's not going so well, it is completely okay to say, I need to go for a walk for 5 minutes and I'll be right back. Because if I don't, I'm going to fucking shoot all of you fuckers. Like, excuse my language, but that's where people get to. And if you just go for that 5-minute walk, take some breaths, but go get some fresh air and remove yourself from that environment, you're probably not going to get into an argument and lose your job or your family or whatever it is, right? Like, there's no excuse to not do it. Get up in the morning, go for a 5-minute walk. When you go home at night, if you're stressed and can't sleep, go for a 5-minute walk. Like, there's no excuse.
Yeah. I mean, when you see the time we spend on social media, right? I guess 5 minutes invested in your well-being every day is actually largely feasible. I would agree with you clearly.
There's so many other things that I would suggest, like writing down forgiveness and all those things, but everybody has excuses and all sorts of things. But you can't have an excuse for 5 minutes of fresh air, removing yourself from that environment that's negative and just moving some energy. And then eventually it'll evolve to 10 minutes because you're going to start finding a new walking route. You're going to run into that squirrel that's your favorite that you name Joe or whatever, and he brings some friends next time. Like, it evolves pretty quick.
What was the name of your squirrel?
My squirrel didn't have a name, but he did save
Okay.
my life. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Jillian, for sharing with us your journey. Again, very, very inspiring to see what you were able to overcome and what you're doing now to share what you took away from those experiences. And yeah, well, I put in the description of the episode all the links to Camp My Way, your Instagram. Is there any other platform that people can either get in touch with you or just follow what you're doing?
Any social media is pretty easy to find us. Camp My Way is pretty easy to look up. It's on Facebook, Instagram, campmyway.com. My Instagram is Jillian A. Brown Photography. Again, you can find it through Camp My Way. You can hear lots of stories of adventure, see lots of photos, and hear tools, all sorts of things. And you can message me anytime. Anyone can. If you want to share too, if you want to connect, if you feel like you need to come to Camp My Way, or just talk, people can reach out to myself or Terrence really easily through any of those platforms.
I can confirm that because that's how we got in touch. Actually, just Instagram.
Yeah.
So
totally.
I'll put all of that in the episode description. Again, a big thank you for the time you took directly from Camp My Way, British Columbia, and I wish you all the best for for the next step with Camp My Way and your next adventures.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.